Hello and welcome to Moto Talk with Steve and Kim. I'm Steve and that is Kim. And this is our first show. If you can let us know if you can hear us in the comments there. That way we know the audio is working. It's working in our ears. That would be good to see.
Yeah, so far it sounds good on this side.
Before we take off here.
Let us know you can hear us.
All right. Thanks, Spencer. So good evening and welcome to the channel. We are here to basically talk everything moto, and that's dirt to street, cruiser to adventure bike, all makes, all years, all models. What else, Kim?
I think the group of friends we know from not only the motorcycling community around here, but also the people that frequent the shop. There's a really rich group of folks that have experiences with a really wide range. There are people that have been to Alaska working in the shop. There's a guy that was a professional drag racer, people that work for very large businesses in the motorsports industry. A lot of great experiences to draw from. And people all have different interests in any motorcycle versus, what other interests they might have, but motorcycles are unique to different individuals. And we've seen just about all of it, more than I thought I would after 60 years of doing this. I get surprised almost every day.
Yeah. And before we totally get started, what I'd really like to do is give everyone a little bit of a backstory on how we kind of met and came to be as far as the shop and all that. I want to give some shout outs first, and I'll miss some people, but over time, we'll, if we miss you, we'll get you on there. But these are just some of the people, places, and shops that have given us some support over the years. Performance Power Sports, Brownsburg, Indiana, New Vintage Metals, Damien, Warner Steel, Indiana Motorcycle Riders Group, Indiana Vintage Motorcycle, IB and Indianapolis Classics, Dreyer Power Sports, Dell's Motorcycle Repair, which is now owned by Bear, and Gary Larkin, who really helped me out a lot. He let me come into the shop and actually do things at his shop before. When this was mostly a hobby. Redline Power Sports. What's that?
Before he moved to Tennessee.
I think it was Arkansas, wasn't it? Or something like that.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yes. LA Cycles, Whitestown, Pickle at Steel Customs, Jeff Leverage, Triumph Indy and their team, Taco Tuesday Bike Night Crew, Adam Ratcliffe. Way back in the day, he designed our logo, which you see in the upper corner here. And he also designed the wrap on my truck. So thank you, Adam. Cycle Gear and Cycle Outfitters, Parts Unlimited. There's so many more places, names that we could thank. Hopefully over time, we'll be able to do that. Tonight, I think Supercross is actually delayed broadcast, so I don't think it actually comes on NBC SN until 11 o'clock, and that's per Keith Carlson. And so if not, it's Keith's fault. So
so while we're talking about sponsors, another local business, my friend Joe Kerr at Joker Fabrication in Brownsburg, top-notch guy. Going to be difficult to get him to work on something because he works on Pebble Beach level stuff, but if you know somebody that needs something esoteric, he can.
He's way up here. We're way down here.
We're way down there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Backstory. What I wanted to start off with is just to telling you a little bit about myself, where I came from, and from early on to here. Turn Kim up just a bit, please. Sure thing. You can move that a little closer.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I was trying to please Kevin Romine, so turn it down.
All right. Hey,
How's
Kevin
this, Kevin?
Romine. Anyway, as a kid, I loved everything on two wheels, especially when I got to see motorcycles and that they had an engine on them and I didn't have to pedal anything. And I think back in Colorado, when I was 10 or 11, I learned to ride a XR. Can't remember if it was a 50 or a 70. But what I do remember is the kid that let me ride it told me that it was supercharged and that if I let the clutch in and out, that does the supercharge, but not to do it too much. Does that make sense?
It does
So,
make sense not to do it too much.
Kind of a little bit of a fib he gave me there. I learned many years later. I spent 29 years working at FedEx and quit there to actually work on motorcycles and start a shop. Late in my FedEx career, when my kids got older, I wanted them to have a chance to learn how to ride something. So we bought a mini bike, and that was kind of the start of the sickness, so to speak, what a lot of people come up with there. And they went dirt biking with me. Then I bought my first vintage motorcycle, a 1969 Honda Dream. There's Killer. And then I started flipping bikes out of sheds, bought them out of a shed and garage and flipping them. And I wasn't really a part of a motorcycle community yet, but started joining various types on Facebook and forums. Then people started hearing that I was working on them, and I started working on them for people, and they started bringing them into my garage. Then we started attending Taco Tuesday, which was actually started, I think, if I'm wrong, Keith Carlson, you can let me know. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Yeah, that was yesterday, buddy. Who started that Taco Tuesday? If you could post that up in the comments. It was Charlie and Al and some of the old timers that did motocross racing and woods racing. Charlie Williams has pretty much done it all, been all over the world, and started attending the Taco Tuesday crew, and it kind of grew, and a lot of vintage street bike guys would show up on their cool rides. Other hobbies for me, I was in martial arts for about 15, 20 years, music and RC airplanes. So this is where I met most of the close moto friends, including Kim over here at Taco Tuesday. And you can kind of maybe take off from there.
Yeah, sure. I don't really remember why Taco Tuesday came up in my world, because I was already doing quite a bit of motorcycle involvement before that. It's been a central component of my life since I was a little kid, really. Not unlike everyone else. I remember getting a Schwinn Stingray when I was 10, and that kind of started my two-wheel interests, and it was more freedom than anything else for me. I started getting Formula One magazines and things like that when I was 10 years old, and I started reading about it worldwide. I didn't have any money and I didn't have any prospects, but I certainly liked learning about it. And I got my first ride on a motorcycle when I was 14. It was a Honda Super 90, belonged to a friend of mine who told me it was easy to do. And then I proceeded to just about put it up a telephone pole because I couldn't quite get the clutch thing down. But eventually I figured it out, and I realized that something like that was doable for me. I really liked cars better, but like everybody else, when they're 14 or 15, if they're not of means, you don't have the money to do that. But motorcycles for me were just freedom and the ability to get out and around without having to ask somebody for something. And it was an inexpensive way to get into being able to travel around on your own. I would say I didn't take a real interest in lots of different types of motorcycling until I was probably in my late teens. At that point, I'd already had 5 or 6 motorcycles, and I got bit by the competition bug. And my very first competition event was on a borrowed Hodaka Super Rat in a motocross in Elwood, and I nearly killed myself at that. But it really bit hard, and I started doing off-road events at that time. And eventually, after probably 15, 20 years of that, I was never really any good. I rode as an amateur in the AMA, and I reached novice level, but I didn't have the skill or the money to continue doing that. So I really didn't like street bikes all that much, to be honest. It was.
How old were you when you got your first bike?
14, or no, I was 15. Okay. I'd just gotten my permit. They used to, in my day, you could have a learner's permit and get a motorcycle license without being able to drive a car by yourself. And that started me
I just rode my friend's bike, so my parents didn't have the money to buy me anything.
Yeah, I did
didn't
too.
want me on one anyway.
Yeah, my parents were ambivalent about it. I mean, I was able to do pretty much whatever I wanted to in that regard, and I had a lot of different opportunities to get different bikes. But I had friends that rode off road. Another benefit to me was I knew a lot of people that were professionals, and I got to travel around to professional events. And it was also an incentive for me not to do it because I saw what it took to be skilled enough to compete at that level. So I was able to make some trips, do some fun stuff, see some people up close that really knew what they were doing. And that's continued throughout my life as it relates to motorsports. I've made motorcycles kind of a central part of my life all along. I did have a day job. I have 2 children. I had a family to raise, and we worked at that together. The process of maintaining a relationship with motorcycles and having a family and a career was challenging if you're really going to get into one or the other. And I kind of had to choose the career as the first priority. So I did 4 decades in technology, working for IBM and AT&T. I had some movement around after that, but I really wanted to get to a point where I could get past my career and do something else. And that's almost exactly what happened working with Steve. We got to be friends from the motorcycle community here, and that was great, but it grew into something more than that because he had a desire to move away from his job and I was moving out of mine. And we decided to work out of this garage we're sitting in, actually. We did that for a year and a half.
Yeah, we did that starting January 1st, 2017. And we had talked maybe a couple months before that. And you were thinking that it would be maybe a year or two. And then all of a sudden something came up, right? Was that what it is?
Yeah, I thought I was.
It happened faster than you thought.
Yeah, I thought I was going to take a retirement that was normally scheduled, but I had an opportunity to buy out about a year and a half early. So I was effectively retired by the end of 2017. So when we were working here, it was more of a catch as catch can. We were doing some hours here and there.
Right.
But then when you wanted to make it more permanent, I kind of had to make a decision. Do I want to do that, or do I want to work on my own flock? But it was so much fun working on other people's bikes that it turned out to be a good thing in the longer run.
Yeah.
And that's what led to kind of where we are now.
So we crammed into this shop and it looked nothing like this. It was just white walls with a bunch of wood shelves. And
we had so many motorcycles in here, we had to roll them out to work on them in here. There was no way to work around it. It became difficult to continue.
And I had actually brought on, just before you brought Ron Cole in here, and he helped out a little bit until he got on at FedEx. And he had done some bike building in the past, but didn't have the extensive experience that you had over the years with multiple brands and models and years and all that.
Well, I was really fortunate because not only was I doing it on my own, but I was watching other people that had really high skill sets. That's kind of how I wound up working with Jason Hart at Chopsmiths. Wound up doing 2 Discovery Channel build-offs with that crew. Saw some real talent up close. And if you haven't seen any of those or didn't watch them on the Discovery Channel, they're out there.
Yeah, we can probably link them after we do this.
Yeah, there's some copyright rules that prevent them from being able to release it in the U.S. under certain conditions. So a couple of them are in Italian. So if you can listen to Italian and break it down, you can watch those.
Right. I'm going to answer this question real quick.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing right there that I had to be careful of, even though in this neighborhood, most of the lots are about 3/4 of an acre. And so you're separated a little bit more, but yet, some of these bikes can be pretty loud. And when Jeff Leverage brought his Harley down here, I forget what year that thing was. It was a hodgepodge a little bit, right?
55 pan that was just super loud, straight pipes, magneto, crazy stuff.
It was so loud. And we tried to just do the day hours, and keep it to a minimum when you have to pull a bike out and you're revving the crud out of it and trying to tune it and all that. But this thing was so loud. We went around the neighborhood once and I had one neighbor come over and that was kind of what got me thinking about moving out
Yeah, we talked
some
about
other
it
location.
because even if we were in the garage, it still was a lot of noise going out into the neighborhood. And normally you didn't want to run them in the garage. You had to take them out there and do it. So
it was nice
smarter
to go out and run around, and then we could go out to the country roads a little bit.
Yeah,
that
if you
wasn't
got
too
far
bad.
enough away.
We have that at our new location as well.
Yeah.
But
it's a commercial park, so
right,
noise isn't really a big issue there.
Right. So after that, we actually brought on Brett Johnson, who now has North Built down off of Gasoline Alley, conveniently located down at Gasoline Alley, and he'll know what I'm talking about there. That's his little saying. He came in for a little bit. Yeah,
I actually met Brett through some people that I was doing vintage sprint cars with. His dad is a well-known guy named Dick, or his grandfather was a well-known guy named Dick Northam that owned a place called Dick's Speed Shop, and he was an IndyCar mechanic and served as a crew chief on a number of different IndyCar entries. So one of the things that Brett brought was just some basic skills at mechanicking things, and he worked for Penske. So he was trying to make a change because that level of motorsports brings people in and makes them go back out again really quickly. So he was looking for something more solid, and that's how he wound up over at our place.
Yeah. So we were all three of us were here with like 3 lifts, rubbing elbows, and we were pulling probably 10 bikes out of the garage every day just to work on the 3 or 4 that we were working on. And so finally we moved out to another location. Joe Saldana, who was in IndyCar racing back in the day. I don't know his whole history, but
yeah, Joe's a very well-known sprint car driver. He's won the Knoxville Nationals. He's been there and done that in sprint cars, but he's also been a very well-known open wheel car racer, and he drove Indy 7 times, and he also did tests and tunes for people that were buying rides at Indy, and Joe would set the car up, and then they would get on. A lot of people don't know that.
Right.
Joe spent a lot of time setting up other people's cars, and he's I think Joe's 74, but he's a relentless worker. He was out at 90 degrees laying block on the new building that was right next to ours when he was doing it. He's the only guy his age that has a 6-pack that I know.
Yeah, he works circles around many half his age, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's great.
So we rent from him, we lease from him, and if you saw the Brownsburg magazine did a write-up on our shop, there were a couple little errors in there. It wasn't really anybody's fault, but it said that we had purchased our shop, and that's not the case. We lease 25 square feet at that location with a couple of storage units, and
yeah, don't tell Joe we bought it.
Yeah, don't tell Joe we bought it, because he'll be on here in a heartbeat.
We'll be back in this garage.
Anyway, so we all moved over to that location, and about a year later, Brett decided to start his own shop, and he took off, and we brought in Mike Hubert, and Mike Hubert was repairing big, huge jets.
Mike's
AMP.
Mike's a 40+ year airframe and power plant mechanic, and he's been there and done that on, not only, turbine aircraft, but also, recips and different kinds of vehicles that, you die to work on, 747s and stuff.
2,500 square feet. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah. It's a little crowded, 25 square feet. But yeah, Mike is a super skilled, and I make jokes about him being the only professional that works there, but it's true that he's been there and done that mechanically.
Speaking of Roger Swartout, you raced with him and his brother back in the day?
I did. I think I met
some local
Carl
names
and
here.
Roger, the very first time I ever met Carl and Roger, I don't know if he'll even remember this, but it was at Mount Meridian at a scrambles, and a friend of mine and I were out there running in the 250 class. It was the first time we'd ever done 250s, and I think Roger was in it on a Bridgestone. Maybe. I could have that wrong, but he'll tell us.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. How you doing, Roger? So after that, then we hired, who was next? Clayton Foster.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was working on a Saturday, and Clayton and his brother just wandered in and said, "Hey, do you have any work here we could do?" And I said, "What do you know how to do?"
15 years old.
Yep. And they said, "Well, I work on dirt bikes." And I said, "Well, we work on dirt bikes occasionally." And I said, "Do you have any tools?" "No, we don't have any tools." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, then maybe we'll have to find something for you to do." And his brother didn't come back. I'm not sure what drove that, but Clive is Clayton's brother's name.
Yep.
But Clayton did come back, and he's been a great addition to the shop. He works hard. I've told him before,
he's learned a lot.
For a 17-year-old kid, the most amazing thing about Clayton is he doesn't swear. And I have no idea how he keeps that discipline, but he doesn't, because virtually everybody around him does, except for Steve.
Yes.
And he lapses now and then.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, so 175 Bridgestone, Roger says. I think I remember that. I think it had up pipe expansion chambers on it, if I remember that correctly.
All right. So yeah, Clayton came in and he's been there a good couple years or more. He's bought and sold a couple bikes, and man, he's really been good for the shop. Sometimes I'll leave early, and you know, when you got a kid like that you can trust to close the shop up, that's something else right there. I wanted to back up a little bit. We didn't talk about some of the bikes that we own. Let me see if I can pull that up. I was going to mention what I have left. I had, before I really started the shop, I had probably 15 bikes in this garage, as I was collecting a few here and there. But I sold almost all of them off except for these four. And my newest bike is a 1983 1100F, 1 year only, 2 colors. This is the faster color, as you know, don't believe those guys that say the red one is the faster. Maybe we'll just have to get out and test that out. But the one I'm not going to race is Brian Bissonette's. And then one of my favorites, which kind of started it all for me, and I know this is a favorite for you, Kim, is the 6970 CB750. You want to give us a little backstory on this bike, when it was made, and why this particular one is so special? Well, aside the Sandcast.
Yeah, there was a big celebration in last year for the 50th anniversary. Actually, it was 2019. It was the 50th anniversary of that bike, and it was a big deal when it was released by Honda, because it was a 4-cylinder for one thing, and it was a big bike for another. In 1969, the biggest bike you could buy from Honda before this one was a 450
bomber.
Yeah,
or whatever.
And so you know, it was really revolutionary. And to be completely honest, when I was aware of that release, I was 17 years old. I was riding dirt bikes and other, you know, light, more competition oriented pieces. And I thought they were big, heavy pigs, and I wasn't interested in them in the least. They were street bikes and I didn't care. But as time went on, I came to appreciate them somewhat more than I did then. And it's become, you know, if I could only have one motorcycle the rest of my life, it'd be that one. And there's something unusual about Steve's in particular. You know, one of the benefits we have of being in this business is we run into people that have some of these extraordinary bikes. This one behind me is extraordinary because it's not restored. You can buy one, fix it up, make it look beautiful. I'll talk about another one here in a minute, but this one is an OG, never modified. You can tell when you ride it that it's never been taken apart.
I do have new pipes on it, though. I did have to get aftermarket pipes.
Yeah, but the rest of the motorcycle
which are
is unmolested,
exact replica
and the way it
repops.
came from Honda. So that's a very unusual thing for a 50-year-old bike. And, you know, frankly, I admire that one too. I have a 69 that I bought from Kenny Stoughton. I'm sure some of you'll know that name from back in the day. I was in a club there that was made up of competition riders called the Circle City Riders, and virtually all of them rode off-road. The late Ronnie Lamassus was one of the guys that was in the club, and Kenny, and that was really before Brian Stoughton even existed. But yeah, Kenny had one sort of like this that was turned into a chopper, and I bought it from him, and I still have that bike today, even though it's been through a number of different lives. It looks more or less like this one now. But yeah, if it came down to one, out of all the bikes I've had, 400 or 540, 50 years, it would be that one.
That would probably be the one I would keep. And
I can explain more about that if somebody wants to know, but that's really kind of special.
Ours actually look identical. His is a 69, mine's a 70.
I had a picture like that. I should have said.
I know it. This is another bike I picked up. There's actually a picture of the shop before I kind of did the renovation. Quite a transformation there. I still motocross a little bit. I actually learned motocross riding later in life when I met Keith about 10 years ago. I was on a Woods bike, an old XR 250, and he kind of got me into this. And I've been riding the same bike for 9 years and ended up with a 2018 250F. And then the fourth bike I have would be this bike. I'm still doing some renovation to it as I've taken some things apart. The Buco bags and the shield are gone, and I'm actually searching for an engine for it. But that will be back on the road here in about a year or so.
Don't mind that dent in the tank.
And don't mind the dent in the tank. Yeah, that's a whole other story. Why don't you talk about a couple bikes that we've got photos of here that you like?
Yeah, so I stuck to
that
just,
you own.
Yeah, for people that know me, they know I have a whole separate building full of motorcycles. They're the ones that I have gathered over time. That the ones that I have now are really important to me. It's very difficult to part with them. I've moved some in and moved some out.
That's the sickness.
But yeah, it is. And for me, rather than make a compromise, if I needed to take on another one, I just got more storage. So if I'd have left it to just being able to keep them at my house, it would have been easier to do. But no point in that. So, my sickness really began again with a Honda Super 90. I have a couple of them, but the entry for me into real motorcycles came, if you want to show the picture of that Norton. By that time I'd worked on and built a number of Triumphs and BSAs, but I didn't really know so much about all of the British bikes, but I was fascinated by the whole concept of the way British bikes were made. You want to bring up that picture?
Oh yeah. Let me grab this here. Sorry about that.
And
we're talking about the Ducati.
No, the Norton on the left. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So
there we go.
This motorcycle came to me. It had done some time as a production racer. That's why I put the wheels and the tires on there. Back in the day, the rules with the WERA were that it had to have similar wheels and tires to the factory ones. So those are Dunlop K81s. But that bike's now, after being run pretty hard, I did a restoration on it about 10 years ago to bring it all the way back. It's got a Kenny Dreer 883 kit and a single Mark III 38 millimeter AMO on there. And you can see some other modifications, but it's really a delightful bike to ride. And if, a number of people will say that Norton's, short of, down in this level of ownership, are about as good as they get for English bikes. And this one's really important to me, and I'll probably keep it forever as well. This Ducati Steve's going to show a picture of is interesting for a couple of reasons. I took it in trade for some work I did. I really didn't know that much about Ducatis. I always thought they were too exotic for me to own. And I got this one from Jay Hart, actually. He had broken the engine trying to put it together. And I said, so what are you going to do with it? He took me and showed me a bunch of boxes full of parts. And it was this Ducati. And it was my first attempt to put a Ducati engine together with just manuals and parts. I'd never seen it done before. So I built that bike, and it's a 750. It's an early 750, and it's carbureted. So it's unique in that it's the least expensive Ducati you could buy then, and it's got a great deal of charm. The interesting thing about this bike is that I sold it, and it got resold 3 times from the time that I had it. And then a guy walked up to us at a show and said, "Hey, I've got your old Ducati. Do you want to buy it back?" And it was a non-runner, so I bought it back, and it's back in my house again. And it's another one of those that's got a soft spot in my heart. Then this is the other 750 Honda that Steve wanted me to talk about a little bit. This is an interesting piece because it was a Bitsa bike. There were a lot of different CB750 parts I had, and I'd done a couple of restorations on early bikes, and I had enough parts to do another early bike if I had a core donor. So that's what this is.
This is not the one from Mid-Ohio.
No.
Okay.
This is a 1972 engine and frame, but everything else on the motorcycle is early 69, 70 first year stuff. And it's a pretty good example if you look close. Even people that know them pretty well can't tell the difference. And I have to be honest and say it's a clone of a 69 or a 70. Right. It's not really real, but it's a good looking result. And the thing I like about this one is I don't have to worry about its value. I can just use it. Which makes that kind of fun. This last one of mine that I'd want to talk about is something that I've owned for 40 years, and it kind of sat unloved in the corner. I paid $15 for that motorcycle in Mooresville, Indiana, 40 years ago. I bought it from a minister that lived in Mooresville, and he had a son that had taken, if you know anything about 305 Hondas, they have a centrifugal oil filter, and the oil passes through the oil filter to the top end. And he had taken that oil filter off and left it on the ground, bolted it all back together, and then seized it. So when he seized it, he took it all apart, and it was all in buckets. And I answered an ad in one of those little local newspapers that said Honda, $15. And I went and picked it up and brought it home, and I made it run, but I didn't make it very pretty. So I've restored so many bikes in the last few years, I decided this one deserved to be done over again.
Spent some time on it and got her done.
So I did every nut and bolt on it and did all the paint and the upholstery, and I had some things re-chromed in Shelbyville. I don't know if you guys need chroming done, but they're pretty good. All the chrome shops take a long time. You just have to hope they do a good result. And that one came out pretty good.
Very nice. Yeah. That one took how long? Just every now and
years,
then,
I guess.
Well, yeah. Once you got started on it, though,
start to
what's a
finish,
restoration?
Something like that took.
What can they take?
Took 2-3 months to do it right, not counting the time that I had to wait on the chrome. That was more like 5 months. But if I had all the parts there in front of me,
right,
the prep and the paint and the fix and all that, probably somewhere between 60 and 90 days.
So, with all the people that are on here, who is not in Indiana? If you can post where you're watching from, that would be kind of cool to see in the comments there. One of the things we're going to do, or that we'd like to do on this show, is just talk about. Now that we kind of got the background stories out of the way and all that, now we'll focus on anything moto. And so I thought for the first thing we ought to bring up safety. And I know for the Indiana Motorcycle Riders Group, Greg McKenzie wants to focus on that. It almost seems like every day you see someone's went off the road, or they may have gotten cut off, or could have been someone else pulling out in front of them. But a lot of times it's the rider, and it may or may not be skill. It might be something safety related. So I wanted to talk about maybe what you look for when you do a pre-trip on a bike.
Yeah, so we can get to the motorcycle, but I hadn't thought about this till you said it this way. We've had a number of different people bring motorcycles to us that had damage. And one of the ways they get damage is people are riding them impaired. We've had several of them come in that were wrecked pretty badly, and you learn that whoever was using it damaged it because they fell off because they were drunk. And that's a really bad idea. Riding impaired is really stupid, because riding on its own, if you're doing it right, you should enjoy it. You should get a lot more enjoyment out of it than needing to be drunk to do it.
Right.
I understand that's reality, but don't do it. If you have a choice, don't do it. And impairment will cause all kinds of problems, because it requires all of your attention to ride a motorcycle and live through it, especially with traffic if you're riding it on the road. The other thing is, we really didn't talk about, is wear a helmet. People, I don't want to preach about it, but if you want to survive a crash, wear a helmet. I read a documentary about how helmets are made, and even the very best ones are only intended to survive with a brain in it, are supposed to survive a 15-mile-per-hour impact, which is how fast your body's going if your brain falls from 6 feet in the air. So, that's not much impact, but just wear a helmet, because if you scramble your brain, you're not going to be able to continue. That's just personal stuff, not riding the motorcycle with your, and again, there can be other impairments. We've had people that brought in motorcycles that, I'm thinking of the lady with the hack.
Yeah.
We've had people bring us motorcycles that say, well, I'm physically unable to ride a motorcycle. Can you fix this one so I can ride it? And you want to say, well, you're so physically challenged, maybe it's not a good idea, and it's dangerous to think you can do it when you really can't. So make an assessment, be brutally honest with yourself. If you can't do it, don't try, because I'm not encouraging to stop trying to be healthy. I'm just saying, don't go out and kill yourself because you're not able.
I know one thing, going back to the actual motorcycle itself, is, obvious things like tire pressure, any type of leak underneath the bike where your back tire is going to roll over it, that type of thing. Back when I was with FedEx and I was a driver, they were all about safety. And one of the things that they would teach us to do is, while we're walking up to the vehicle, even before we're doing our pre-trip, to be looking all around the vehicle, underneath, for leaks and of course checking your tires and all that kind of stuff. But what are some other things that and you guys can list them out there too?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of
on
great
the
feedback,
comments.
and it's jumping around so much it's hard to stay on topic. So we'll have to go back to these when we get an opportunity to go back to each individual comment. And again, we're learning at this as well. This is the first time we've done this, so we'll see what flows better and doesn't flow better. But from a safety standpoint, it's
We'll keep Keith Carlson's comments off.
We'll leave Keith out of this. But one of the things that we see really often is people, and they do it for a good reason. They bring us motorcycles that need work, and there are things like throttles that are sticky, brakes that don't work. We had a guy come in just the other day, ask us to work on his bike. We did extensive work on it. It had no front brake at all, and he wanted it that way. I mean, that puzzles me, but
as in zero, this was a hydraulic front brake that had no hydraulic fluid in it, no brake fluid in it, and it worked zero.
Yeah. And he said, well, I've been riding this bike for a long time without one. I don't really need it. And I mean, that to me, that's crazy. But
so we had him sign off on that. And that's to each his own.
Yeah. But where I was going with that is we're going to have people that have sticky clutches. The brakes aren't great. The tires are terrible. The throttle sticks. Those are all very dangerous things because you have to have full control of the vehicle, even under the worst conditions. Mm-hmm. You've got to have good control. And, to Steve's point about tires, you need to kick those tires every single time you get on it, and make sure that there's not only ample air in the tires, but proper air in the tires. If it's not, it's going to be out of balance. And I don't want to pick on the same guy again, but he also had completely perished rear suspension, and the bike was just bouncing up and down, springing.
Yeah, so the rear shocks were.
If you were riding that bike down
horrible.
The street, it would be awful. Yes. And so we have a note here from Aaron talking about the Safe Rider program. Aaron took a Safe Rider course. I think I have this right, at the Harley Davidson shop, and had a great experience doing that. And she rode more than that, early on. I always encouraged my kids to ride their motorcycles if they had one. But she actually wanted to go get professional training and got some good input. And she's probably in one of the toughest crucibles now you can ride in the United States, which is in the DC area. So she's riding her motorcycle out of Virginia and into Washington, DC. She's done it a number of times. But I also say that I went to Kampala, Uganda, and I rode motorcycles with her there. And if you are ever trying to figure out if you have the skill to ride a bike in traffic, that's the place to prove it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be there.
She got my respect after I saw what it was like riding there. Not at all like it is here.
When Bonnie and I went to the Dominican a couple of years ago, it was culture shock in many ways. One of them was how many motorcycles there were. And of course their rules and regulations are nothing like here in the States. And like Bonnie and I were looking up, the death ratios and all that. And it was astronomical.
In Africa, they call them bodas, and it's a rough English translation of border to border. And that because everywhere you look, there's motorcycles, hundreds of thousands of them. Everybody's got one. It's crazy.
Very cool. Good suggestions out there. We need some feedback on this, because if there's a topic you want to talk about, you can post it in the comments. We will go back through those comments, and we'll edit out all of Keith Carlson's comments for one. And we'll look at your comments and maybe be able to add those suggestions to future shows.
At some point we're going to have people calling in and talking about what they wanted to talk about, and then we can bounce around between those subjects. If there's somebody out there that wants to be a guinea pig other than Keith, I would say you can call in and we can talk about your subject with you on the line if you want to do that.
Yeah. And feel free to send me some pictures of your bikes. We can add them to the show. And we'll kind of go from there. Let's see. Greg McKenzie. Let's see what we got going on there. Oh yeah. Doing some rallies in the spring.
Yeah. So just so you know, I mean, one of the most talented builders I've met in the whole time I've been doing this is a guy named Dusty Pine, who's on this thing. And I know he's been there and done that on a motorcycle, and his comments here are to reflect that it's worthwhile to take a basic riding course, and that's just not a casual exercise. If you really think you know what you're doing, you might learn that you don't. If you take a basic riding course, it's probably worth doing. So that's a great endorsement from a very seasoned rider.
That's true. And if you are a new rider or you want to be a rider and you may or may not know what kind of bike you want, I know some people get it in their mind. I might as well talk about this because we get this a lot. We're a premier, I guess, vintage bike shop. So there's not a ton of vintage bike shops around. And sometimes
there are good reasons for that, and we can go into that too.
Yeah, sometimes someone will come to you and they're like, I've got to have this vintage bike because it's cool looking. But they're not always going to be reliable, even if they've been rebuilt.
Yeah, and I got it at a low price or whatever,
Yeah, I got this for $150, and if I just throw about $300 at it,
I can usually that doesn't work.
Cool and out there riding a bike. So
it's we'll always discuss a compromise, that. But one of the reasons why it says Hoy Vintage Cycles is because there are modern bikes that do everything very well. You can go out and buy a thing that looks like a vintage bike, and I'm thinking of the Indian built 650 twin that's out there right now. That's made by Royal Enfield. Those things are only about $5,000, $6,000. You could probably buy a used one for $4,000. And they'll do everything well that you want to do. They're just not a vintage bike. They just look like a vintage bike. So that's not a bad choice for some riders to go that route. Just depends on what you want to do. But if you really want to own a vintage bike, that's kind of our wheelhouse. We're working on lots of them from some very seasoned owners of vintage bikes.
Ron Mahoy is not a bad example either. Ron has bought a few vintage bikes and tinkered with them, and had the desire to get some kind of resto mods going on. And I think he ended up finishing a 125 CB 125, but a suggestion was made, and he actually went out and bought one of those new Kawasaki 900s.
Yeah, it's like a
retro
got a
bike, Z1 retro look, and he's even though it's cold out, he's already having a blast on that. So that's
you'll
that's
get
a good
more
example.
riding time on something that's fresh than you will on building something, but then there's a lot of reward from building them as well.
Right. So, all right. Well, hey, we're going to wrap the show up. Appreciate y'all getting on here and checking it out. And we'll put another show together next week, just like we used to do with the Taco Tuesday thing. Can't wait till spring so we can get out and do some riding, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback on what you like,
please give us some
feedback,
feedback.
what you want to add, what you don't want to add. It'd be great.
We'll see you later.
Thanks.